or that's that. So in other words, do you as a floating LNG producer also have to provide the shipping, or will the customer have his own ships and come and pick up your LNG? Obviously, logistics for floating LNG are a bit more complicated compared to an onshore plant in terms of planning the loading of the carriers. The last point, where is core? It goes back to your question, that what we've seen at the time that Shell was trying to sell the LNG from the first floating LNG development, that it makes a tremendous difference that you can offer to the customers a fallback from your portfolio. So in case the plant will not perform as expected, that you can promise to that customer that you will get LNG to that customer from your portfolio. And particularly, I think, for the initial developments, that portfolio possibility for offtake is an important element. Financing and insurance, we talked a little bit about it this morning. Particular balance sheet, and you see that at the moment, a number of companies are still the ones that can put the balance sheet against the development of floating energy, effectively meaning that they carry the majority of the risk, not only the risk in case of non-performance of the floater, but also the risk that in that case you need to come up with alternative supply of LNG, and that you need to compensate the feed gas supplier in case you're not taking off the feed gas. I keep saying, and my opinion hasn't changed yet, that in general lenders are not the most progressive thinkers in terms of risk taking, and so it remains an industry that is very much prepared to offer you money, provided that you take all the risks and make sure that through contracts they are fully covered and against a nice premium. Insurance, again, it's an argument that plays into the size. You will find that the insurance industry gradually is stepping up to insure floating LNG projects, but at the moment still up to a certain limit. So if you would go above a couple of $1 billion, let's take that sort of size, then probably anything above you would have to insure again from your balance sheet, unless you find other people prepared to take that risk. And so, if you're not an international oil company or an MSC with a big balance sheet, probably what it takes to get your project going is to find a project integrator, a party that brings the expertise to the table to integrate all these 4 key activities that are required to develop the project. Not only the expertise, but also the network and the relationships to set up a partnership. And from the right-hand side, you can see partnership really means across the board, without all the parties that are involved in developing the floating energy project. Apart from the partnership, there is one more element that is of critical importance when we talk about floating energy, and that is building and growing the confidence. As I said, the fact that Shell took FID was a significant step in building and growing that confidence, and people have very much the feel that if a company like Shell does take a decision, that really means that they've looked into it seriously and they're really convinced they can make it work. But what you increasingly see, when you, in particular when you start talking to the energy off-takers, that mentality has changed from tell me towards involve me. So people that are considering to buy LNG from a floater really want to get down into the weeds to understand the technology, to understand how the project is being set up, how it's going to be financed, and your answers to all the what-if questions. So basically your risk register and a mitigation plan. Going back to lessons learned from floating regas, you will see that some of them will be very much applicable to the floating liquefaction industry as well. Floating regas, originally developed by Accelerate, the initial thinking was to pick up a cargo, to shuttle, to regasify, go back, pick up a cargo, and that has developed towards permanent solutions rather than temporary solutions, from seasonal to baseload. Even those parties that originally were thinking about seasonal applications moved on to baseload applications. You see that floating regas makes a very convincing case that economies of scale isn't always the factor that drives you towards the floating solution. Floating regas can very well get onshore terminals, and in particular the last point, creating flexibility, option value, by having moving elements in your value chain is something that not only applies to floating regas, but definitely will also apply in the future to floating liquefaction. And as you heard from Philip, floating regas moved from a typical offshore application towards also jetty-based type solutions. For example, the Shell floating regas terminal in Dubai is a jetty-based solution. The Petrobras floating regas solution in Swabek is a jetty-based. So not necessarily always offshore solutions. That gets me to the opportunity and explain to you what Pangea is. The name Pangea, or the company that's been set up, Pangea originally was the supercontinent because before it was all split into various continents. And so the thinking behind Pangea is bringing the continents together again. What Pangea, the company Pangea does is basically providing this role of the project integrator, from buying the gas, providing the midstream solution, and bringing the LNG off-takers to the table, so that basically we get all these elements integrated to allow parties that are either an upstream player or either an LNG off-taker or a utility, or parties that have the gas but not the expertise to develop a floater, to help them developing a floating LNG project. The way that's being done is basically building on the philosophy that if you can build in a controlled environment, you can control cost, you can control your schedule, you make use of efficiency, and in the case of Korean yards, it means that you have access to financing support, you have access to the export credit rating, plus the philosophy of design one and build many. So in other words, the power of replication, so that you standardize as much as possible, and of course, depending on feed gas situation, you will have to tweak part of the treatment units, but you try as much as possible to standardize so that you can replicate the solutions, which leads to lessons learned and higher efficiencies. The initial shareholders in Pangea, and I'll show you how that evolves, are DSME and Hemla. DSME, I don't need to introduce for this audience the DSME yard, state yard. Hemla is a Norwegian business development company set up to develop stranded gas opportunities with floating solutions. And there is Next Decade. And Next Decade is a company set up by Kathleen IJsbrand. Kathleen IJsbrand was the one who developed Accelerate, the CEO of Accelerate, and moved on from there, and now set up Next Decade because she's convinced that like for floating regas solutions, there is now a future for floating LNG solutions. Admittedly, a little bit more complex and a little bit a few more dollars compared to a floating regas solution, but even more so the need to offer that integrated role to parties who are playing in that chain. So next decade, DSME and DNH. DNH is a 50-50 joint venture between DSME and Hemna are the initial shareholders in Pangea. Pangea is looking at developing the Van LNG, that's the Tama LNG project for offshore Israel, where Israeli partners plus Noble Energy are the partners providing the feed gas and looking for Pangea to develop the solution. Pangea is looking at export of LNG from the US through a floating LNG solution. Why floating LNG? Because there's that many terminal opportunities. Because we believe you can do it much faster and much more controlled compared to onshore routes. And similarly, we're looking at some of the African opportunities. And then depending on the project, strategic partners participate in that project as a shareholder. So the key element of this proposition is that you have the yard behind you as the main partner in order to make the development of this project possible. So in this case, Pangea will buy gas molecules, will build, own and operate the floating LNG unit, will sell the LNG to the buyers, in other words, will invite the buyers to the table and ultimately sign contracts with the buyers, develop the financing, develop and manage the project, and over time will effectively, by having multiple projects, start a marketing and trading entity, which basically creates a portfolio of LNG. And so to parties interested in participating in floating LNG, what is ultimately the real value proposition and what makes it so unique? It's ultimately driven by price differentials, looking at the demand in Asia and the prices for LNG in Asia compared to other parts of the world and compared to the spread between oil and gas. Significant higher net present value opportunities compared to domestic solutions. That's definitely the case, for example, in Israel. That's the key driver for export to Israel. It's basically this Henry Hub at somewhere hovering around $2 per million BTU, the driver for export from the US. And I expect that in the case of African opportunities, that might again be the case there as well. Apart from the lower cost, even more importantly is the accelerated investment decision and the accelerated startup time. People underestimate what the contribution to your net present value overall is if you are capable of starting up 1 year early. And that's particularly important, I think, in the next 5 years window to come, because up to 2020 there is a real need for LNG. There's many projects in the pipeline that somewhere around 2019, 2020 will be up and running. Not all of them obviously will go ahead, but some of them will be around. And so that's where, against current predictions, demand and supply, where people believe there might regularly be ample LNG available. But for those people that can hit the window over the next couple of years, that there's a real opportunity. The digital element is an important element as well. Increasingly, larger projects find it more difficult to get financing. You see it also in the US with Chile trying to look for an export project. So you're talking about sort of bite-sized investments, and depending on the size of your floater, anywhere between 1.8 to $3 billion versus an equivalent of at least $6 billion for an onshore plant, or multiples of that, because very often you see in onshore applications still the push for economies of scale, multiple trains, and therefore, for that reason, high numbers that need to be financed, which in particular when it's a greenfield development with no cash flow ongoing, that becomes increasingly difficult. And we talked about the green guard element, the efficiency, the strategic partnership opportunity that was highlighted by Philip as well. If you talk about 10% shareholding in a $30 billion project, that would give you more or less 100% shareholding in a floating LNG project. And so all of a sudden, investors can be significant shareholder in these ventures compared to relatively small shareholders in bigger ventures. So, as I mentioned before, the first project that we're developing is the Tama field. Why is Tama field so interesting from a floating LNG perspective? Because the upstream part has been developed as a domestic supply opportunity and will start up early next year. And with minimum additional investment on the upstream side, you can then produce the additional volumes in order to get the floating export project going. That's number one. The second one is, as you probably most of you are aware, that apart from the Tama field in Israel, which is all of 9 TCF, in the meantime, Noble Energy, that is the operator, has found the Leviathan field, which is well over 20 TCF, and in the meantime, between Israel and Cyprus, significant more TCFs have been found. And the expectation is that a significant part of these volumes will be developed by floating LNG. So in other words, a driver for multiplication and repetition, whereby you try to, as I said earlier, design one and then build many. Apart from that, Israel, a little bit similar to like Qatar, from a geographical location, is ideally located between the Asian and the European markets, so can really use that opportunity for arbitrage. A couple of words on the US export opportunity. It was amazing to see in Kuala Lumpur that a number of people from the US were talking about the issues around Henry Hub being at $2 per million BTU, whereas we think that it's a major opportunity, not only domestically for the US in terms of their own industry and start using gas and LNG for transportation fuels, but also as an export opportunity. Just an example, there are multiple locations, either brownfield or greenfield, that could be developed into a floating LNG export opportunity in the US, and with all the shale gas production, that is a matter of time that we'll see the first FIDs in the US. And again, because of this timing window, I think in particular the US is a race for time. First movers will be the ones who will take on pole position, because ultimately the question will be how many projects will be approved in the US for export. So that we believe there's really a space for first mover advantage. We talked about the mindset that floating regasification, floating liquefaction is an offshore application. And just to give you a feel, without going into the details, jetty-based, dockside, near-shore developments. This gives you a feel for how much gas globally is near shore and would be available for floating LNG solutions as well. So once we get over that threshold, that people get a bit more comfortable, and in particular, lenders get a bit more comfortable with the so-called novelty of the technology and the concept, we believe you will see a significant development of floating energy projects versus onshore energy projects. So, in summary, the vision and mission of Pangea is basically to be that project integrator and to support parties that have not all either the financial strengths or all the technical expertise or the commercial expertise across the value chain to bring that project together and to develop the project. But also probably the fact that contrary to what the normal IOC, international oil company or national oil company attitude is, that in order to develop a project they want to have access to molecules. That's not the mission in life for Pangea. Yeah, so in that sense, it's an opportunity for all the shareholders in the value chain to really share the cake without having that need that somebody wants to get in your upstream part and wants to really own molecules, which many countries believe it's ultimately their own, and why should they give it away to outsiders? The global portfolio development, I think we talked about it, the efficiency of notification, and then although in first instance Pangea starts from the point that we will develop floating energy solutions and deliver FOB, in other words, expect the customers to come with their own ship and take up the energy. We have in the meantime discussions with parties where those parties are looking for Pangea and also to provide the shipping solution, and that is something which we deliver. So, for those of you who were here last year, I think the interesting development you see is that last year I had a similar presentation talking about those critical success factors and how could, if you're not a big IOC or MOC, how could you then get it together? What I'm presenting today is basically that we have created a solution for those parties who want to play but are not all across the value chain or have that big balance sheet to play, and to bring them together. Thank you very much. Questions?
There's time for a few questions.
Yeah, see, I told you.
Usual suspect. What kind of liquefaction process would you be recommending to use for your project?
Yeah, very good question. Given that our driver is speed and accelerated schedule, we basically looked at the industry and looked at which combination would give us a leap into developing the first floaters. And so the combination which we have is DSME as the shipyard, together with FLNG. developed a pretty well developed generic feed, which at the moment we are translating into a site-specific feed for the Tama field in Israel. That's being done in combination with KBR for the top sites, and so Höegh will also be the party that will ultimately own and operate the floater for the Tama field. And so, for those of you, I don't know whether everybody is aware, but the Höegh the Höegh generic feed was based on niche technology, which is basically a variation on nitrogen technology, but with a methane loop. I mentioned to you that Noble Energy, the US company, is the operator. Noble Energy did not have any significant LNG experience. So before they decided to enter into this project, we went through an extensive due diligence where obviously, again, a comparison was asked with SMR, DMR type technologies. And that due diligence has really reconfirmed the feasibility, the viability, and I would argue the attractiveness of a niche type technology for floating LNG applications.
Any more questions? I have nothing to say.
Maybe you should sit at the same table.
I assume that you're talking about 1.5 million tons per annum?
We talked about 3 trains, 3 million ton, and probably because of the feed gas composition, we might be even able, with this concept, to produce a bit more than 3 million tons. The interesting thing about the Israeli gas is that it is very, very lean gas, and that's why it makes design also very suitable for US application, because Israeli gas is more or less nearly pipeline gas classification, so we don't need condensate extraction, we don't need LPG extraction, and so also not storage for those products, which simplifies greatly the whole design. And so the design is based on 3 million tons.
I thought the value chain is always the value of condensate that you can sell rather than lean gas.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we had a deep dive into the economics for this project. But ultimately, condensate and LPGs would be a nice add-on, a nice bonus to the whole project. Still, if you compare the economics of the project with an alternative onshore type of development, then CapEx-wise, plus, as I mentioned earlier, the effect of the contribution to NPV because of the accelerated schedule makes this all very, very feasible, even though we don't have the bonus of the condensates. And that is even more applicable to the US, because what you will find in the US is that parties probably onshore treat gas and extract condensates and LPGs, so you get really your pipeline gas at a very lean spec, which for your floater makes it relatively simple. You don't have all those treatments on board. But with price levels of $2 per million BTU, still a very attractive proposition.
The other question I want to ask is that you see the issue in PNG, where NOC basically wanted a world-class LNG operator. How do you going to overcome that? You're going to buy molecules from those countries.
Sorry, I'm not sure whether I understand.
I mean, for example, PNG government talking about world-class big player to operate LNG plant. How are you going to overcome that with a new company, to buy molecules from the country?
Basically, by bringing very credible and credit-worthy off-takers. So in the case of Pangea, and this is public knowledge, for the Israel project, we have signed letters of intent with Gazprom and Colgas. So that means you bring very credible and credit-worthy off-takers to the table. and the fact that you have the yard DSME behind you. Yeah? And that is ultimately, remember my earlier slide where I talked about trust and credibility. That's what the industry, and in particular the lenders, the bankers, will be looking for. So that in combination with the feedback supplier, which is Noble plus the Israeli parties, which in itself are credible producers as well. They have a proven track record. They are producing, they have been producing. That makes it viable.
Any more questions? I know it's lunch next, but still. No? No? Yeah, Rene will still be around, so you can grab by any questions. Thank you. On time.
1:30?
1:30.
Back at 1:30. All right, enjoy your lunch.